Welcome to the forbidden glass of wine sips and secrets with Lady Divine, where stories of love, life, passion, betrayal, and personal truth are uncorked one glass at a time. Each week, Lady Divine opens letters from listeners searching for clarity in the complicated journey of the human heart and the lessons life teaches along the way. With wisdom, wit, and a touch of divine fire, she reminds us that age does not silence desire. Experience sharpens wisdom, and the heart is never too old to feel. So pour yourself a glass, lean in close, and prepare to sip from the forbidden glass of wine. Here is your host, Lady Divine, my beautiful listeners. This is Sips and Secrets, the Aging Diva in her, with Lady Divine. The place where we pour the truth slowly, where desire is never judged, and where every heart has a story worth listening to. Now on this show, we talk about the things people whisper about, the things people hide, the things people feel but rarely say out loud. And tonight's letter? Oh my goodness. Tonight's letter is about age, passion, temptation, and loneliness. It's about a woman who refuses to stop feeling alive, and a younger man who awakens something inside her that refuses to go quietly. But the real question tonight is not about pleasure. The real question is about worth. So pour yourself a glass of something bold. Lean in close, because tonight we are opening a story called A Confession of the Heart. Tonight's first quote of the night is this: "Desire does not retire with age. It simply becomes more honest." Keep that thought in mind as we open tonight's story. Now, let us head over to Lady Divine's cellar selection for some wine pairing tips. Let us select the perfect wine for tonight's secret. Before we open tonight's letter, you know we never begin a story on the forbidden glass of wine sips and secrets without first choosing the perfect wine. Because every story carries a mood. Some stories require a sweet wine. Some stories require something light and playful. But tonight's story calls for something bold, mature, and unapologetically complex. So tonight we uncork a deep, velvety Cabernet Sauvignon. Why Cabernet? Because Cabernet is a wine that ages beautifully. It becomes richer with time, more layered, more powerful. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply commands respect the moment it touches your lips. And tonight's letter is about a woman very much like that wine. A woman with depth, a woman with experience, a woman who has lived, loved, raised children, survived heartbreak, and still carries fire in her spirit. But just like wine, sometimes the question is not whether the wine is good. The question is whether the person drinking it truly understands its value. So, my darlings, pour your glass, take a slow sip, and let us open tonight's letter, because this story is about the aging diva in her. Pour slowly, love boldly, and never be ashamed of the fire inside you. Now, let's begin with tonight's letter. Dear Lady Divine, I'm a 65-year-old aging diva, still radiant, still full of fire. I ended my long relationship with the father of my 2 daughters about 15 years ago. My daughters are now grown women, 31 and 29. Since that relationship ended, I haven't really been in anything serious. I've dated here and there, enjoyed life, and yes, Lady Divine, I've kept up with my female maintenance, if you know what I mean. But about 7 years ago, something unexpected happened. I met a 25-year-old man. Yes, darling, I became a real cougar. At first, it was just fun. 2 people enjoying each other's company. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I fell for him hard. We dated on and off for years. Then for 5 years, we had absolutely no contact at all. I thought I was over him, until one day he showed up again. And the moment I saw him, I realized something. My feelings had never gone away. For 3 years after that, we were inseparable. He practically lived with me. Then one day, without warning, without explanation, without goodbye, he left. Lady Divine, I was devastated. I lost weight. I lost sleep. But the worst thing I lost was closure. Then out of nowhere, he came back. My friends warned me not to open that door again, but my heart needed answers. And honestly, my body remembered him too. That young man has stamina like a young bull and confidence like a seasoned lover. So here we are now, 2 years since he came back. He doesn't live with me anymore, but he visits. Let's just say this cougar still gets serviced at least once a week, sometimes more. But this time, he told me something. He has a girlfriend, a younger woman who lives abroad. Whenever she comes to visit, he disappears. Lady Divine, we've been intimate without protection before, and that scares me. I recently had a UTI and told him from now on, we must use protection. Because in my heart, I know something. His girlfriend abroad may not be as faithful to him as he believes, and I must protect myself. But here's the embarrassing part. I told him I would stay quiet when she visits. I told him I would disappear, that I would be his only when she's not around. My friends say I'm setting myself up for heartbreak. One day I asked him a question. When she moves here, will you still see me? He said no. Once she moves here, it's over. That answer hurt more than I expected. But I understand. He wants children, a family, things I cannot give anymore. But Lady Divine, it has been nearly 10 years of this emotional roller coaster. I want to end it, but it's hard because there is something about that young man that makes me feel alive. Even if my oil isn't flowing like it used to. He swears I'm still tight, but baby, that's just natural dryness that comes with time talking. Lady Divine, what should I do? Signed, a seasoned cougar with a tender heart.
What would you do? My darlings, before we move forward, I want you to sit with this for a moment, because stories like this are never just stories. They touch something personal. So let me ask you something. If you were in her position, would you stay? Would you accept the moments, even knowing they may never turn into something permanent? Or would you walk away and risk losing the one person who makes you feel alive? Think about that, because your answer reveals what you believe you deserve.
My darlings, before we move forward, I want you to pause with me for a moment, because stories like this tend to stir something personal inside the people listening. Maybe you have known someone like this woman. Maybe you have been this woman. Or maybe you have loved someone who stayed in a relationship long after their heart knew it was complicated. And if that is the case tonight, know that you are not alone. Love has a way of teaching us lessons in the most unexpected ways, sometimes through joy, sometimes through longing, and sometimes through the quiet realization that what we want and what we deserve are not always the same thing. Now, my darlings, let us take a moment to breathe after that letter, because what we just heard is not simply a story about an older woman and a younger man. No, it is much deeper than that. It is a story about time. It is a story about desire that refuses to fade. And it is a story about what happens when a person reminds us that we are still alive in ways we thought the world had forgotten. You see, society has a very strange habit. It celebrates youth loudly, but it whispers about maturity, especially when it comes to women. At a certain point in life, people begin to speak about women as if passion should quietly pack its bags and leave the room. But the truth is something very different. Desire does not disappear with age. In many ways, it becomes more honest, more intentional, more fearless. Because by the time a woman reaches her 60s, she has already lived through so much. She has loved, She has raised children. She has endured heartbreak. She has survived disappointments. And through all of that, she has also learned something powerful. She has learned who she truly is. So when someone comes along, especially someone younger, and looks at her with admiration and hunger, it can feel like the world suddenly turns the lights back on. It can feel like someone has rediscovered a part of her that had been quietly sitting in the shadows, and that feeling can be intoxicating. But here is where wisdom must enter the conversation, because there is a difference between someone awakening your spirit and someone anchoring your future. And that is the line we must explore tonight. But before Lady Divine shares her thoughts completely, let us hear from someone who has been listening and reflecting on this story with us.
Hello, Lady Divine. My name is Marcia, and when I heard this letter, it felt very familiar. Because when a younger man looks at a mature woman with admiration and hunger, it can feel like the world suddenly turns the lights back on. After divorce or long relationships, many women feel invisible. But when someone younger desires you, you remember that you are still beautiful, still powerful, still wanted. But the painful part of this story is when she said he disappears when the other woman visits. Because that's when the truth becomes clear. She's not the woman he's building a future with. She's the woman he visits when he wants passion. And that can slowly break a woman's heart.
How about we break down for a minute? Now, my darlings, let's slow this down and really look at what is happening here. Because when you are inside a situation, it is very easy to miss the truth. So let's break this into 3 parts. First, the emotional connection. This woman didn't just spend time with him, she built memories. Second, the physical connection. He made her feel alive again. And that kind of feeling can be very powerful. And third, the reality. He has already told her where she stands in his future. And when those 3 things don't align, that is where confusion begins.
Marcia, thank you for your honesty tonight, because what you said touches on something many women understand immediately when they hear a story like this. Being desired again can feel powerful. It can feel exciting. It can feel like a reminder that the woman inside you never actually disappeared. She simply needed someone to notice her again. And there is absolutely nothing shameful about that. A woman should never apologize for wanting to feel attractive. She should never apologize for wanting to feel desired. And she certainly should never apologize for wanting to feel alive. But the moment that attention begins to turn into waiting, that is where the balance begins to shift. Waiting for his messages, waiting for his visits, waiting for the moments when he chooses to show up, waiting for the small pieces of affection that remind you he still remembers you. And slowly, without realizing it, the woman who once felt powerful begins adjusting her life around someone else's convenience. She begins shrinking her expectations. She begins lowering her standards. And sometimes she begins telling herself stories that make the situation easier to accept. But Marcia, you said something very important tonight. You said that when a woman begins shrinking herself, it becomes difficult for her to grow again. And that is a truth every listener should remember. Because the most beautiful thing about maturity is that it should bring confidence, not compromise. A woman who has lived long enough to know her worth should never feel like she must hide in someone else's shadows. She deserves to stand proudly in the sunlight. You know, my darlings, women often understand each other's hearts in ways that are difficult to explain. Sometimes all it takes is hearing another woman speak honestly about her experience for the truth to suddenly become clear. And that is why conversations like this matter. Because when women speak openly about love, desire, and vulnerability, they give each other permission to be honest about their own lives. And honesty is always the first step toward wisdom.
Good evening, Lady Divine. My name is John. And from a man's perspective, I see something different happening. That young man is living 2 different worlds. With this woman, he gets passion, freedom, excitement. But with the younger girlfriend abroad, he sees a future, children, family. Many men convince themselves they can maintain both worlds until the moment comes when they must choose. And when that moment comes, they usually choose the future they imagined, and that means someone gets hurt.
John, thank you for bringing your perspective to the conversation tonight. Because sometimes hearing the male side of these situations helps everyone understand the dynamics a little more clearly. What you described is something that happens more often than many people realize. Some men separate their emotional worlds. One relationship becomes the place for passion and excitement. Another relationship becomes the place for stability and long-term plans. And in the mind of the man living that life, those two worlds may feel completely separate. But the heart does not always operate in separate compartments, especially when time is involved. Years of connection create emotional investment. Intimacy creates attachment. Shared moments create memories that become very difficult to release. And that is why situations like this can slowly become complicated. Because what may begin as a casual arrangement can quietly evolve into something much deeper for one person involved. John, you also mentioned something that deserves attention. Eventually, a man must choose the life he wants to build. Family, children, a future that extends beyond the present moment. There is nothing wrong with wanting those things. But where wisdom must enter the picture is in recognizing when someone else has become emotionally attached to a relationship that was never meant to last. Because continuing to enjoy the comfort of someone's presence while already knowing that you will eventually walk away can create a quiet kind of heartbreak. Not intentional cruelty, but still pain. And that is why clarity is always kinder than confusion.
Now, let Lady Divine share something important with everyone listening tonight. Here are signs you may be in a situation like this. You only see them on their time. You disappear when someone else appears. You feel amazing when they're there, but empty when they leave. You avoid asking certain questions because deep down, you already know the answer. If you recognize these signs, you are not in a relationship. You are in an arrangement. And arrangements rarely protect the heart.
Now, my dear letter writer, a seasoned cougar with a tender heart. Let Lady Divine speak directly to you. You are a woman who has lived a full life. You have raised children. You have experienced love. You have endured loss. And through all of those chapters, you have remained open to feeling something again. That alone deserves respect. The young man in your story awakened something inside you. He reminded you that your spirit is still vibrant, that your body is still capable of passion, that your heart is still capable of excitement. And those experiences were not meaningless. They were real. But the question we must ask now is not about what you felt in those moments. The question is about what you deserve moving forward. Because love should not feel like waiting. Love should not feel like hiding. Love should not feel like adjusting your life around someone else's convenience. A relationship that lasts nearly a decade carries weight. It carries memories. But sometimes the most powerful act of self-respect is recognizing when a chapter has served its purpose and allowing it to close. Not with bitterness, not with regret, but with dignity. Because the woman you are today deserves a love that stands beside her openly, not one that visits quietly and disappears when someone else arrives.
Many may wonder why this relationship is so hard to leave. But baby, let's talk about something people don't always admit. Why is it so hard to walk away from a situation like this? It's not just about the person. It's about the feeling of being wanted, the feeling of being touched, the feeling of being seen again in a way you thought life had moved past. And when someone gives you that feeling, you don't just hold on to them. You hold on to the version of yourself you become around them. That confident version, that desired version, that alive version. And letting them go can feel like losing that version of yourself. But here's the truth. That version of you was never created by them. It was always inside of you. They just reminded you it was still there. And my loves, remember this. Sometimes in life, we meet people who are not meant to stay forever. They are meant to remind us of something. Our beauty, our worth, our ability to still feel. But if we are not careful, we will try to turn a moment into a lifetime. And that is where we lose ourselves.
Now, before I give my final thoughts to the woman who wrote this letter, let me say something to everyone listening tonight. Relationships are rarely simple. They are filled with emotions, memories, hopes, and expectations. And sometimes we hold on to situations not because they are perfect, but because they remind us of something we are afraid to lose. A feeling, a connection, a moment in time when we felt deeply alive. But the most powerful relationships are the ones where both people choose each other openly, not secretly, not occasionally, but fully. And that is what we must always remember. Wine and wisdom. Wine matures with patience. Love deepens with truth. But the heart that forgets its worth will always drink from an empty glass. So sip slowly tonight, my darlings, because wisdom, like wine, reveals itself only to those willing to taste it fully. And always remember, tonight's wisdom is simple. Stop trying to be the wine someone hides in the cabinet. Be the wine placed proudly at the center of the table. Now it's time for tonight's divine dare. For the next 7 days, do something that reminds you that your life is not waiting for anyone's permission. Take yourself somewhere beautiful. Wear something sensual. Dance, laugh, flirt with life again. Because here is the truth Lady Divine wants every listener to remember tonight. You are not competing with younger women. You are offering something they have not yet grown into. Depth, confidence, experience, and that is divine. Tonight's last quote is this: "A person who knows their worth never begs to be chosen." Let that stay with you tonight, my darlings. Before we close tonight's story, Lady Divine wants to leave you with a truth many people discover only after years of living. Sometimes we hold on to relationships not because they are right for us, but because they remind us of who we used to be. This woman held on to that young man because when he walked through her door, time seemed to disappear. He reminded her of youth, of excitement, of the woman she once saw in the mirror years ago. But here is the truth we must all remember. The person who reminds you of who you used to be is not always the person meant to walk with you into who you are becoming. And when we confuse nostalgia with destiny, we risk holding on to chapters that were never meant to become the whole book. So tonight's truth moment is this. Sometimes the most powerful form of love is the courage to release someone who only knew how to visit your life instead of building one with you.
Sometimes the hardest part of growth is not learning something new. It is accepting something you already know. And tonight, if this story touched your heart, then perhaps there is something within you asking to be acknowledged. Don't ignore it, because clarity is a form of self-respect.
My beautiful listeners, if tonight's story stirred something inside your heart, then perhaps it was meant for you to hear. Because every story we share here carries a piece of truth that someone, somewhere, needs to recognize. Maybe tonight's story reminded you of a relationship you once held on to for too long. Maybe it reminded you of the importance of knowing your own worth. Or maybe it simply reminded you that desire, passion, and longing do not belong exclusively to the young. They belong to anyone who still has the courage to feel deeply. So tonight, wherever you are listening from, take a moment to appreciate the journey that has brought you to this point in your life. the experiences, the lessons, the heartbreaks that taught you what love should truly feel like. Because each of those moments helped shape the person you are today. And that person deserves respect, deserves honesty, deserves a love that is not afraid to stand in the light. Until next time, my darlings.
This is Lady Divine reminding you. Speak your truth. Protect your heart. Remember, my darlings, never water down your wine or your worth. Good night.